Salutations friends, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite layering scents. These aren't layering combos or recommendations. Instead, whenever you hear me talk about my favorite layering scents, I'm always mentioning these fragrances. So I thought I would just sit down and share with you the ones that I constantly reach for and I utilize and I think are great tools for fragrance wardrobes and in rotations, and talk to you guys about why I like these so much. So let's get into the video. Now, I have a bit of a sunburn. I've been trying to be more active and get outside and get more exercise activity, and I'm a little burnt, so just excuse my sunburn. Now, these fragrances, you don't need these specific scents, but if I have reviews of any of these fragrances, I will link them below. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys about why I chose these fragrances, because you might have scents like this already in your wardrobe. I don't really recommend going out and purchasing scents to layer or blend unless you absolutely have to, because in my opinion that kind of ruins the point. Then you might as well just buy another scent, unless you were purchasing one fragrance to layer with, say, 4 or 5 different fragrances. Rather, I wanted to share with you the fragrances that I have and why I chose the ones that I did and how they have really helped expand my fragrance collection and fragrance rotation, which is saying something because geez Louise, that's a lot. Now, I'm gonna grab the 2 that you hear the most about, and the one that I don't shut up about, which is Lemon Verde, but also Herba Fresca. Now, Lemon Verde, in my opinion, is quite literally my most utilized layering fragrance. And I don't have to use a lot of this, one spritz, but this is one that will instantly freshen, brighten, or add a bit of juicy, citrusy sweetness to any fragrance. And it does so in a way that doesn't conflict with the composition of pretty much almost anything that I am wearing. And you're gonna hear me say the word conflict a lot, because that's the biggest thing that you're going to really want to make sure that you're careful of, is that the formulas and the notes aren't conflicting with each other, that they're actually working in harmony, so that way when you blend these fragrances together, they smell really good and they don't smell like, oh no, I just walked past a fragrance counter and every single person that worked there sprayed me with something else and I just smell a little bit too pungent. You want it to smell like you were intending to smell like that and not like it was an accident, and a bad accident. And in my opinion, Lemon Verde does it beautifully, because it's not too tart, because it's not too sparkly, because it's not too sweet. It works in a way that just blends and smooths and balances any composition. If I think a woody aromatic is a bit too sharp and I want it to be a little bit more smooth, Lemon Verde. If I think a gourmand fragrance needs a bit of acidity and brightness, Lemon Verde. If I think a citrusy fragrance needs a bit of soft sweetness, Lemon Verde. If I think a woody aromatic fragrance needs anything, Lemon Verde. This fragrance just works so well as like the mayonnaise of anything, and I use it all the time, and I don't want to use a lot of it, one spritz. And generally, if I'm layering a fragrance, I might spritz this like on one side of my neck, and then I'll spritz whatever fragrance anywhere else. So maybe once here for the other fragrance, and then again like one on each wrist. So that's generally how I would layer any fragrance, really. But with Lemon Verde, I have found this to be one of the best tools for layering and blending and expanding my fragrance rotation. And just because this is a citrusy fragrance doesn't mean that I don't also use this for winter fragrances and fall fragrances and gourmand fragrances. Like I said, the fact that this isn't super bright and sparkling, sometimes some gourmand fragrances, you want that just a touch of acidity. And the lime and just the way that this fragrance smells does that beautifully without ruining like this sultry decadence that winter and fall fragrances can have. So if you have a fragrance like this that has perfectly well balanced, I would say more composed of what you would consider top notes, lots of citruses, lots of brightness, some aromatics, this would be a great type of fragrance to have as a blending and layering fragrance. I just really like Lemon Verde, and you can usually find a gray market for a really, really affordable price. But because it's a nice balance between juicy and tart and bright, it just doesn't conflict with anything usually. And again, like it's like the mayonnaise. It works so well. Fresca is along the same lines of Lemon Verde, only it has a little bit more of, again, that kind of minty, herbaceous bright. This one works really well, and guess what? It also blends really beautifully with Lemon Verde. I do really enjoy this one a lot. I also like to blend this one with, again, a lot of fragrances that might have a berry note in the opening that are more aromatic. So think of the type of scents that are a little bit more woody or dry that might have a black currant or a blackberry leaf or note in the opening. Mint usually goes really well with those, but sometimes they might be too salty, sometimes they may be too sharp, sometimes there might be a patchouli note in there, a little bit of ambroxan, that just kind of makes it a little bit too heavy. This is a great scent to, again, just one spritz that will just lighten it up a little bit, that won't conflict with the composition. So if it's like more of a fall winter fragrance that you want to wear in the spring summer, this is a great fragrance to spritz with that, which is why it's one of my favorites. Another fantastic and also very affordable layering and blending line is Solo Notes. Now you can find a lot of fragrances that are affordable, like Demeter and Solo Notes and Good Chemistry and Pacifica and a few other brands where they're like under $30 for their eau de parfums, and they come with body mix bars, another great brand. But what I like specifically about Solo Notes is they are first and foremost designed to be layered, and secondly, even though they are a formula and they have different notes, most of their fragrances smell like what they are marketed as. There's a few that are a little bit more inspired, but if they say it smells like jasmine or musk or yuzu, they generally will smell like a very well put together Solo Note. And the two that I think are great are yuzu and vanilla or vanille. The reason why I chose these two are sometimes you want a bit of brightness and sometimes you want something to be a little bit more smooth, a little bit more decadent, a little bit more sexy. And having vanilla as a blending, balancing member of your layering rotation is always good. And again, their vanilla does not conflict. It works really, really well. It's not a frosting vanilla, it's not a vanilla bean, it's not a vanilla pod, it just kind of is like a vanilla. So if you want something to be a little bit more vanilla, or if you think a vanilla note will round out a composition, this is great. I like the yuzu in this, again, it's yuzu, but I like the yuzu from Solo Notes because I like how it is a little bit more astringent and a little bit more of a sour citrus. Now, sour can be positive or negative, and when it is a negative, it can smell like sour milk, but if it smells like it's distinctively supposed to be like a sour wood or a sour citrus as a scent profile, it can add a lot of nuances and complexity and brightness and acidity. It can add something different to a fragrance composition. And sometimes sour citruses and woody aromatics can balance and blend and add a bit of brightness. And I do like the yuzu from Solo Notes from that. These full retail price, I believe, are like 20 bucks, and their body mists are even better. So if you are looking to add any of these to your fragrance rotation, I am holding the eau de parfums, but I would recommend the body mists way over any of the eau de parfums for layering and blending purposes. Looking to add a bit of floral, like a floral touch to your fragrance, I think one of the ways that people like to add florals is that they're looking to add a white floral, if they're looking to add a rose. And the reason why I say white floral and not a specific white floral is because in some cases, it's the profile of a white flower that people want, that creaminess, that exotic kind of transportive softness and roundness that a white floral can have. And with rose, it's the same thing. You want that romantic big red rose, but maybe you don't want a wet rose, maybe you don't want a dry rose, maybe you want something specific. And so for me, the rose that I've recently just been liking to add if I want a little bit of rose in a fragrance is Ellis Brooklyn's Rose. Now this fragrance isn't the most exceptional fragrance on the market. It also isn't a horrible fragrance. It's not bad actually. And for the price, I don't think that you're being swindled. As a layering addition to your fragrance, I think this is great. And I think that when you're looking to add a rose as a layering and blending, you want it to be not the most distinctive rose, because obviously roses smell different. Some of them are bigger and velvety and sweet. Some of them are a little bit more aquatic. Some of them have wetness to them. Some of them smell softer and sweeter and more astringent. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many different roses out there that are utilized. You really just want, again, a stereotypical rose fragrance that's not going to conflict with your composition. You want almost a bland rose. I hate saying that because I actually do really like this fragrance. But I find that this is a way more powerful and utilized in my collection, not wearing it on its own, but using it to add, again, that touch of rose that I think fragrances need. Sometimes I'm like, I think this woody aromatic would benefit from a little bit of rose, or I think this rose fragrance needs a little bit more rose, or this soft citrus fragrance, I want more rose. I love rose. This is a great scent. So I'm not saying, again, don't go out and buy this fragrance for the sake of adding a rose, but if you have a rose fragrance in your collection that doesn't wow you, it's not the type of rose that you think smells very distinctive, that stands out on its own, but it smells like a decent rose scent, those are going to make some of the best layering for other rose scents, because it's not going to conflict with notes or distinctive roses or elements. A great example is if you have an oud saffron rose combination, and maybe the oud's hitting you a little bit too funky, and maybe the patchouli is a little bit too earthy, and you wish the rose was a little bit more pronounced, but the rose is a very distinctive rose. Maybe it's a Bulgarian rose, maybe it's a Taif rose, and you don't want to ruin the composition of that distinctive rose with the oud and the patchouli. You just want the rose to be a little bit more front and center. That's where something like this would be perfect. So that's what I'm talking about. You don't need this fragrance for it. This is my favorite. That's why I'm sharing my favorites. However, this one is great, but if you have one like that in your collection, I would definitely say give it a whirl with some of those fragrances that you want a little bit more of a kick of rose in there, and see if it works out. Looking for the white floral, I've talked about this so much. This is from Floralinda. This is Orange Blossom. Now, the reason why this is my favorite, and the reason why I like Orange Blossom specifically, is because Orange Blossom and Neroli, there's something about the way that those florals smell that are just, they work well in a variety of different formulas. They work well in gourmands, they work well in tropical fragrances, they work well in more masculine leaning scents, more feminine leaning fragrances, fruity scents, chypres. They just, for some reason, if they're not front and center, they work so well in the background and elevate compositions. And what I like about this particular little guy right here is, first, is they're so affordable. I think they're like $6-7. And also, this has like a little bit of greenness in there, so it's not super creamy, sweet orange blossom. It just smells really, really nice, and it works so well as more of a balancing element to fragrances where you want, again, more of an orange blossom, but you might want more of a little bit of a greenness to it, not so much of a sweet creaminess, but you still get that beautiful, distinctive orange blossomy white floral scent that, again, works so well as, again, kind of the mayonnaise of a variety of different compositions. It works really well. Again, kind of like the rose, this will add a little bit more of an element of a white floral almost punchiness because of the greenness. Again, not a soft, transportive creaminess. But when I'm looking to add more of a white floral, I would say balance to a composition or emphasis, it's almost like I don't want that creaminess. I don't want that luscious indolic ripeness. I want something that's going to be almost like a salt or a pepper, or something that's going to add a bit of heat or warmth. Like if, you know, it was a recipe, you want something to be a little bit more of an oomph. And Orange Blossom to me is a very distinctive white floral, but it's not something that to me is conflicting where people are like, that's a tuberose, oh my gosh, that's a jasmine. It's very easy, it's not challenging. People don't usually have insane amounts of trauma around this particular white floral. And again, the way that this smells, because there is a bit of a brightness to this, it just balances a lot of different fragrances and compositions well. So again, if you have a woody aromatic and you want it to have a little bit of softness to it, an Orange Blossom like this would work really nicely. If you have a slightly too indolic white floral fragrance and you want it to have, again, a little bit of brightness and a little bit of clarity, an Orange Blossom. If you also have a super dated, maybe too much of a musky like Magnolia or Gardenia white floral, a nice Orange Blossom would again add a brightness and a softness to that. And I particularly like Orange Blossom. That's why I have an Orange Blossom in this video. And I particularly like this little orange guy. But I think any type of very, I'm not gonna say safe, because I don't think white florals are safe, but with Orange Blossom specifically, since it does have a bit of a brightness to it, it can be utilized in different ways rather than just a flower. It can add a clarity, it can add a softness, it can add a roundness, it can add a sweetness. And that's why I like that one specifically, because it does have a little bit of more of a greenness to it, which works really well if I want to use it in more kind of aromatic, masculine, or shared scents. Next one is more of a priming fragrance, and also is one that is very, very well represented in the layering and blending sphere, and it's Eccentric Molecules Molecule 1. As you can also see, this is probably one of my most worn fragrances ever. I do love this. Eccentric Molecules Molecule 1 is basically just ISOE Super. And there's a lot of other ISOE Supers out there, so I'm not saying you have to spend a top dollar on ISOE Super. I particularly prefer Eccentric Molecules Molecule 1, but do not spend top dollar. If you find a cheap or DIY ISOE Super that works for you, by all means do that. I just particularly like the extra pencil shaving emphasis that this has on my skin. It just smells really nice. And this one does work really well to prime fragrances and make them last longer. Now this on my skin basically smells like pencil shavings again. And so you might think to yourself, why do you want to smell like that? But actually that is so attractive. It smells so good on the skin. And if you want to, again, like I was saying with a rose fragrance or some of these other fragrances, if you want to brighten, if you want to add a little bit of florals, if you want to make something a little bit more sexy with vanilla, round something out. But sometimes you might have a floral fragrance that you think to yourself, I want this to be a little bit more shared. I want this to be a little bit more aromatic. I want this to smell like pencil shavings. This is great because this is going to have a nice, beautiful base of that kind of almost cedar chip, dry cedar chips on your skin. And it smells really, really good, and it smells fresh and attractive. I actually get way more compliments on this than you would expect, but it works so well with florals, especially I would say greener, fresher florals. So if you have some of those scents that are maybe like tea rose or a garden rose, or some of those white florals that aren't so tropical, but they're more minimalistic. So you have like a jasmine, maybe a little bit of a musk and a patchouli and a bergamot, and you want it to be like a little bit more woody aromatic, a little bit more shared. This is an excellent fragrance. So this is one of my favorite fragrances in my layering and blending kind of like rotation toolbox, whatever, because it does help to prolong those fragrances that don't have good longevity and it's one of the only ones that does add that kind of woody, aromatic, cedar-esque, like pencil shaving base that I love. I do love that. And it smells so good. I love this fragrance so much. When I travel, I take this with me. If I'm going someplace particularly hot and sweaty, I take it with me. So yes, I've been taking it with me because I spray myself with this. I particularly am obsessed. And yeah, this is this little travel case. And it is a very, very, very oversprayed fragrance too. When I spray that, it is like 15 sprays minimum. I'm just like drowning myself in that fragrance, but it does a good job. It smells really good. It does help fragrances last longer, and I do like how it is more of a aromatic layering. So again, it will take some scents and makes them more shared or even a little bit more masculine. So that's nice because I do have a lot of scents to make scents a little bit more feminine, a little bit more gourmand, a little bit more sexy. It's nice to have something to kind of, you know, be on the opposite. Another one that you can definitely use kind of like a more masculine and aromatic, more of a grassy addition to fragrances. But this isn't more of a priming fragrance. This is definitely like won't make your fragrances last longer, but does smell really good. This is the older version. They've renamed this, same formula, and it's Vetiver Babylon from Armani Privé, and I think it's Vetiver. I don't know the new name. I will link it below. That'll be the new name. I've had this one forever. I wear this 1 or 2 spritzes, so I mean, obviously it doesn't look like I wear it a lot. Normally, if I'm going for a level of aromatic, kind of grassy, dry, I might just wear Guerlain's Vetiver. I love that one. That could be a part of this list, but it's not as easy to layer and blend as this one. When it comes down to layering and blending, this one is more subtle and bright and a little bit more citrusy, just a little bit. The Guerlain Vetiver is a little bit more pungent in your face, but in all the right ways, it's really gorgeous. So I find this one to be a better blending and layering scent, and Guerlain's Vetiver to be a better kind of everyday kind of dumb grab Vetiver scent. If I want a little bit more Vetiver in my Vetiver, I grab this one. And then the last fragrance is one that I find myself just loving this fragrance so much that I've just been layering this with just about anything, and it's Lalique Amethyst. This is like, again, a berry pie. So kind of like going into if you want more citrus, if you want more woods, if you want more aromatics, if you want more vanillas, sometimes you might want more berries. And to be perfectly honest, that makes sense. Berries, blueberries, blackberries, black currants, raspberries. Berries are used in so many different formulas, in so many different compositions, and masculine, feminine, like bright, gourmand, sexy, daytime, formal. It is impossible to imagine perfumes that don't utilize a berry note because they are so important and they do so much. And Amethyst, to me, is one of the best berry dominant fragrances where it is like a true berry, it's a true pie, but it doesn't smell cheap. There's something about it that just smells beautiful and delicious and sexy. So on its own, it's great. And layered and blended with other fragrances, like I really like this with Aqua Celestia from Francis Kurkdjian. Obviously, it's excellent with Lemon Verde. It's really good with Herba Fresca, and it's also really fantastic with Yuzu from Solo Notes. But this is also great if you have, again, some woody aromatic fragrances that you think could benefit from a little bit more of a dominant berry note. And if you have maybe some gourmand fragrances, maybe some of those very popular coffee dominant designer fragrances that are very dominant that you find everywhere, and you want them to be a little bit more different, a little bit more sexy, a little bit more stand out. This is excellent for those, especially kind of the coffee ones, because the acidity and the coffee note in those fragrances, they're usually also generally balanced with like a patchouli and maybe like a rose and a jasmine, and you might maybe see a violet in there. This actually will work really well with those, and it gives it something a little bit different, a little bit more sassy and sexy, and it just smells really, really good. So I think this is one that I've definitely been reaching for a lot since I've got it, and is one that is a most favorite, even though I've only had it for a few weeks as part of a layering and blending, part of my layering and blending rotation. So those are the fragrances that are my most favorite layering and blending scents. And again, I don't think that you need these particular fragrances. I think that if you were really to take anything from this video, you should take more stock in the fragrances you have and see how you can expand your fragrance wardrobe with layering and blending, and see if that's a way that you can add more scents to your collection without spending more money and adding more scents to your collection. These are great ways to add more options to your fragrance rotation and your fragrance wardrobe without spending, like, again, hundreds of dollars on a new fragrance that you might only be able to wear a few months out of the year. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd love to know your favorite fragrance layering and blending scents and combos. Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.